Let's Loose, part 21 of 30, my favourite, most inspiring books. Now, if you're anything like me, you know, I walk into a bookstore or on my Kindle and there is so much choice, I'm kind of overwhelmed. So I like to have books recommended to me because it gives me a starting point, which nicely segues into my first book. Is called The Choice Factory by Richard Shotton. Now, I've mentioned this in another video because he explores the sort of behavioural economics behind human psychology, but linked to marketing. I think I talked about it when we were looking at pricing. You know, does 99p sound better value than £1? In this scenario of choice, you know, let me tell you some books, because if I go into a library and there are thousands of books, the choice for me is then too overwhelming and I end up coming out of the library with no book. So he explores all of this, but in the context of marketing. So fascinating. Look, whether you're interested in psychology, marketing, or just as a consumer, it's just, love it. So that's number one, The Choice Factory by Richard Shotton. Book number two, The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. Now, I talked about Brene before. This book, where I have found useful, is, you know, something happens and straight away your own perspective is like, I must have done something wrong. It's me, and not thinking sort of further about what somebody else's situation might be like. You know, these expectations of perfection that we put on ourselves, and how to untangle that. I can't really explain, but when I read, in fact, I have her audiobook and I refer back all the time. I like listening to, it's more conversational, but this, yes, The Gifts of Imperfection. You know, you have a view of something. I always imagine like looking through a cylinder that's up close to your eye and you see this bit. And then when you step back, you realise all of this other context to a situation that you kind of took as just on you, and maybe your fault. You met with someone and they were a bit grumpy to you, and straight away you think, oh, what have I done? Rather than thinking, oh my gosh, I wonder why they might be grumpy. Maybe something's happened. This sort of thing, I mean, yeah, fascinating. In fact, one of my favourite phrases ever comes from Brene Brown. In fact, it might even be this book, which is accept that everybody is doing the best they can with what they have. Love that. Who else do I have in my book? Oh yes, and I've talked about this a few times. Start With Why by Simon Sinek. I'm not going to go into this any further, other than it was a pivotal moment for me in terms of that final peg in going to hand in my resignation and find my purpose, find my why. Love that book. What else do we have? Oh yes, again, I've talked before, sort of businessy things, the personal growth. The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Now, this book was recommended to me. We had a new chap start at work and I was kind of fascinated by him. He seemed very grounded, down to earth. You know, he came across, he's switched on, and he's like, oh, this is my favourite book. Anyway, I picked it up. I downloaded it off my Kindle and started to try and read it. I was like, holy cow, what's it? Presence awareness? Went back. I can't remember. I've tried to read this book a couple of times. Obviously was not present and aware enough to read it. So there's a moment probably in life, you know, given that he's a spiritual teacher, when this book, again, is one I refer back to frequently. It's a real deep dive into presence, awareness, the universe. It's a fave. It's worth trying. Another book that I've mentioned before, and a bit sort of left field, I came across this one kind of by accident, was by Mcconaughy. Oh, I can't. The famous actor. All right. Green Lights. I think I talked about this in part one. There were lots of little threads, lots of little green lights going off during this whole process of, what should I do with the, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? Should you do a job you love? And until you start noticing them, and they're everywhere. These little flashes of like, yes, yes, go for that. His story is really fascinating. He gets his dog and he goes off in his Airstream, which I looked at as well, but you know, he's a famous actor. They're about 60 grand just for the basic model. They're pricey. But he got off and, you know, he goes exploring, and based on sort of intuition and it's a fabulous book. Really, really great. Now that's my kind of top 5. But just to caveat that, Jordan Peterson I've talked about before. I find the words he uses are really, they're way, way above my level of intellect. I can't remember, I don't know what they mean. It would take me forever to read some of his books because as I said, I would need a thesaurus. But the 12 Rules for Life, he has presented in Tolle format. And there's a couple of versions on there. I think it's part 1s and part 2. They're a couple of hours long each. So for me, rather than reading the book, which would take me literally in fact, it's not a possibility because it's just too complicated. I listened to his, the tour on this particular book, these 12 rules. Amazing. You'll have heard, you know, get up, make your bed. Start there. I do make my bed. And so then the final, I'm reading a book now. This was recommended to me. Another recommend, see, can't help myself, too much choice. If you've watched another video, I was looking for inspiration and I found Yasmin Creative, and I went and spent a weekend doing a workshop doing ceramics, fabulous. But she'd recommended this book called Big Magic, let me think, Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear, which sounds, you know, it's a fabulous concept by Elizabeth Gilbert. So I'm midway through reading that at the moment, but she has this belief concept that there are ideas here, there and everywhere. And at some point, an idea might land on you, you do something with it, brilliant. But if you don't, it's still a good idea. So it hops over to the next person, or the same idea has sort of multiplied and hopped onto lots of different people. And so you might have an idea that you're doing something with at the same time that somebody else is manifesting with that idea as well. It's just this, there are no new ideas. There's just this sort of universal bucket of ideas, and they're desperate to get out into the world. It sounds barking, but I'm really enjoying it. And in terms of creativity and inspiration and all of that, it's gets the juices. Oh no, I'm not going to say that. I'm enjoying reading it. So those are my top 5, plus one that I couldn't read but I listened to, and the one that I'm reading now. So maybe those are useful to you. There's no choice, there's 5, plus an audio, plus a current. And if you read the Choice Factory, you'll understand the method in the madness. If I'd given you 10, that's probably too many. And if I'd given you 2, it's not enough choice.